You got fat, Henry, Raymond spat, his voice dripping with disgust as if I were nothing more than garbage rotting in the sun. I stood there frozen in the courthouse parking lot, my cheek burning red, my heart shattering into pieces. I knew I'd never be able to put back together. Inside me a tiny life was growing, a secret I carried alone, a truth Raymond would never know. This child wasn't his. It belonged to Albert, the alpha who'd held me for one unforgettable night before vanishing like smoke. Our divorce had been finalized just yesterday. The judge's gavel had fallen with such finality that I'd felt my entire world collapse in that single moment. But Raymond wasn't done with me yet. He dragged me out here to the parking lot, probably to unleash one last round of cruelty, to ensure I left with nothing but shame. Look at you, he continued, circling me like a predator. You've completely let yourself go. I can't believe I wasted 3 years on someone like you. I remained silent, my hand instinctively moving to rest on my stomach where nothing showed yet, where no bump revealed the truth. But I could feel it, that subtle change in my body, the tender sensitivity in my breasts, the exhaustion that hit me in waves. A small life nestled inside me, a secret I'd been hiding for 6 weeks now, terrified of what would happen once the world found out. You ruined your own life, you know that? Raymond laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. Nobody's gonna want you now. You're damaged goods. My throat tightened, but I refused to cry in front of him. I'd already given him too many tears during our marriage, too many nights where I'd sobbed alone in our bedroom while he stayed out with his friends or his lovers. I'd never been sure which. The divorce had been his idea, announced casually over breakfast one morning as if he were discussing the weather. I'm done with this, he'd said. I'm done with you. Raymond shoved me backward and I stumbled, catching myself against a concrete pillar. Get out of my sight, he snarled. I don't ever want to see your pathetic face again. He climbed into his sleek silver car without a backward glance, the engine roaring to life as he sped away, leaving me standing alone in the cold afternoon wind. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering despite my coat. For the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly alone. No family to turn to. They'd disowned me when I'd presented as an omega at 16. No friends. Raymond had systematically isolated me from everyone I'd once known. No money. Our joint accounts had been drained, and I'd signed away everything in the divorce just to make it end faster. But I wasn't truly alone. A black car rolled into view, moving slowly, deliberately. The tinted window descended with a smooth electric hum, and my breath caught in my throat when I saw who sat behind the wheel. Albert, the alpha whose scent I could still recall with perfect clarity, cedar wood mixed with something darker, something that had haunted my dreams for 2 months. He wore a black leather jacket that emphasized his broad shoulders, and those gray eyes of his fixed on me with an intensity that made my knees weak. The same eyes that had gazed at me with such fierce hunger that night in the club, the night everything had changed. Henry, he said simply, my name on his lips sending shivers down my spine. My entire body locked up. I knew exactly who Albert was. Everyone in this city knew. He ran the underground, controlled territories with an iron fist, dealt in things that existed in shadows and silence. The night we'd met, I'd been drowning my sorrows at an exclusive club, somewhere Raymond would never go, somewhere I could forget I was a married omega, trapped in a loveless bond. Albert had approached me at the bar, and for once in my miserable life, I'd felt seen, wanted, desired. We'd spent one night together, intense, passionate, overwhelming. He'd made me feel things I'd never experienced with Raymond, touched parts of my soul I hadn't known existed. And then, when morning came, he was gone. No note, no number, nothing but the lingering scent on the hotel sheets and a pleasant ache in my body. Now he was here, appearing out of nowhere like fate itself. Get in the car, he commanded, not asked. There was no room for negotiation in his tone. I took a hesitant step forward, then stopped. Why? The word escaped before I could stop it. A slight smile curved his lips, though his eyes remained serious. Because you need me. And maybe I need you too. My feet carried me to the passenger door before my brain could fully process the decision. My hand touched the cold metal handle, and my heart hammered so violently I thought it might burst from my chest. Every rational part of my mind screamed at me to run, to refuse, to protect myself from another alpha who might hurt me. But Raymond's cruel words still echoed in my ears. You got fat, and Albert's voice offered something different. You need me. I opened the door and slid into the leather seat, the door closing behind me with a solid click that felt like sealing my fate. The interior smelled like him, that intoxicating scent that made my omega instincts flare to life, despite my attempts to suppress them. The car was immaculate, expensive, powerful, dangerous, like its owner. Albert pulled back onto the road smoothly, his hands confident on the steering wheel. Neither of us spoke for several long moments. I stared out the window, watching the city blur past, wondering what the hell I'd just gotten myself into. My hand drifted to my stomach again, a protective gesture I couldn't seem to stop. Where are we going? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Somewhere safe, he replied, his eyes never leaving the road. Somewhere you won't have to stand in parking lots getting insulted by men who never deserved you in the first place. My throat constricted with unexpected emotion. He'd been watching. He'd seen everything. And instead of driving past, instead of leaving me to my fate, the question burning in my mind was simple yet terrifying. What did Albert want from me? And more importantly, could I survive whatever answer he gave? The city lights reflected off the windshield as we drove deeper into the night, and I realized with startling clarity that I'd just crossed a threshold. There would be no going back to the life I'd known. Whatever waited ahead, whatever Albert had planned, I was committed now. My hand pressed flat against my stomach where our child grew, a secret that changed everything. The first thing that overwhelmed me when I settled into Albert's car was his scent, that distinctive combination of cedar wood and something untamed, something primal that spoke directly to my omega nature. Every breath I took filled my lungs with him, made my pulse quicken in ways I desperately tried to control. My fingers gripped the edge of the leather seat, knuckles white with tension. Albert drove in silence, his profile sharp and commanding in the dim light from the dashboard. I found myself stealing glances at him, the strong line of his jaw, those penetrating gray eyes focused on the road ahead. One hand resting casually on the steering wheel while the other shifted gears with practiced ease. He exuded confidence and control, yet beneath it I sensed something coiled tight, like a spring ready to release. Minutes stretched between us, filled only with the purr of the engine and the whisper of tires on asphalts. Streetlights flashed past the windows in rhythmic intervals, casting alternating shadows and light across Albert's face. I wanted to break the silence but didn't know what to say. Thank you for saving me? Why are you here? What do you want from me? All the questions felt inadequate. You're pregnant, Albert stated suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. My heart stopped, literally stopped beating for what felt like an eternity before slamming back to life with painful force. I looked down at my body. I wasn't showing yet, couldn't possibly be showing. How could he know? How I started? But he interrupted me. Omega scent changes during conception, he explained, his tone matter-of-fact, sweeter, heavier, more complex. His eyes flicked to me briefly before returning to the road. Yours has changed. Significantly. Panic flooded through me. If he could tell, could others? Would Raymond find out? Would the whole world know before I was ready? My breathing became shallow and rapid. Who's the father? The question came without preamble, direct and unavoidable. My mouth went dry. I could lie, should lie, probably, but something in Albert's presence demanded honesty. You, I whispered, the single word barely audible. The car lurched to a violent stop, throwing me forward against the seatbelts. Albert had slammed on the brakes so hard that the tires screeched against the pavement. He jerked the vehicle to the curb and turned to face me fully, his gray eyes burning with an intensity that stole my breath. Mine? The word held a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't quite parse. Surprise, certainly, but also something that looked almost like hope. You knew and didn't tell me. Shame washed over me, hot and suffocating. I dropped my gaze to my lap, unable to meet those piercing eyes. I tried to find you, I admitted, my voice cracking. After that night, I went back to the club, asked about you, but nobody would give me information. Then Raymond filed for divorce, and everything fell apart so fast I could barely breathe, let alone track down someone who clearly didn't want to be found. Silence stretched between us, heavy and charged. Then Albert reached out and took my hand in his His grip was firm, almost painfully tight, but not cruel. Possessive, claiming. "Do you understand who I am?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yes. Then you should also understand that what's mine stays mine. Whether that's territory, business, or—" His thumb traced across my knuckles. "The child. My child." The words should have frightened me. They probably would have frightened any sensible person. But instead I felt something unfamiliar settling in my chest. Security, perhaps. The promise that I wouldn't have to face this alone. "I don't want anything from you," I said, trying to maintain some dignity, some independence. "I can take care of myself and the baby." Albert's laugh was short and humorless. "Can you, Henry? Your ex-husband just humiliated you in a parking lot and threw you away like trash. You have no home, no money, no support system." Each truth he spoke landed like a physical blow. "And pregnancy makes omegas more vulnerable, more susceptible to health complications and societal dangers. You know this." Everything he said was accurate, brutally so. I had nothing. I was nothing, at least in the world's eyes. "So what do you propose?" I asked, hating how defeated I sounded. Albert released my hand and restarted the car, pulling smoothly back into traffic as if we'd just discussed the weather rather than the trajectory of my entire future. "You'll come with me, live in my home. Let me ensure you and the child are safe and provided for." "Just like that?" Disbelief colored my words. "Just like that." I turned to look out the window, watching the city transform as we drove. We were leaving the modest neighborhoods behind, heading into areas where buildings grew taller and more luxurious, where money and power resided. My mind spun with implications and possibilities. Moving in with a mafia boss, even temporarily, was insane. Dangerous. Reckless. But what other choice did I have? Sleep on the streets? Try to find a shelter that would take a pregnant Omega? Crawl back to Raymond and beg? "If I agree," I said carefully, "what would you expect from me in return?" For the first time since I'd entered the car, Albert smiled, a genuine expression that softened his harsh features slightly. "Trust, Henry. That's all I need from you. Trust that I'll keep you safe." "Nothing else?" I pressed, needing absolute clarity. "Nothing you're not ready to give freely." He glanced at me and I saw sincerity in those gray depths. "This isn't a transaction. You're carrying my child. A child I was told I could never have. That changes everything." The vulnerability in his voice surprised me. This powerful, dangerous man who commanded fear and respect from an entire city sounded almost lost. Hopeful in a way that suggested he'd given up hoping long ago. We drove in contemplative silence for several more minutes before I spoke again. Okay, Albert repeated, seeking confirmation. "I'll stay with you, at least until I figure out what comes next." The words felt like surrender and salvation all at once. Albert's hand found mine again, this time gentle rather than possessive. "Nothing comes next except us, Henry. You, me, and our child. That's the only thing that matters now." As the car climbed higher into the hills where the city's elite resided, I felt the weight of my old life falling away. Raymond, the divorce, the loneliness, all of it receding like a nightmare upon waking. What lay ahead remained uncertain and probably dangerous. But for the first time in longer than I could remember, I wasn't facing it completely alone. My free hand moved to my stomach where our secret grew, and I wondered what kind of life this child would have. What kind of father Albert would become. Whether I was making the biggest mistake of my life or the smartest decision, only time would tell. When Albert's car pulled into the underground garage of his building, I felt like I'd entered another dimension entirely. The parking structure gleamed with polished concrete and strategic lighting that made even this utilitarian space look elegant. Security cameras monitored every angle, and I spotted at least 2 armed guards stationed at key positions. This wasn't just a home, it was a fortress. We took a private elevator that required a keycard and fingerprint scan to operate. The silence between us felt different now, less tense and more contemplative. I watched the floor numbers climb, 20, 30, 40, until we reached the penthouse level. When the doors opened, my breath caught. Floor-to-ceiling windows dominated the entire space, offering a panoramic view of the city below. Lights twinkled like earthbound stars, traffic moving in luminous streams through the urban landscape. The floors were black marble, so perfectly polished I could see my reflection staring back at me with wide, uncertain eyes. The furniture was minimal but clearly expensive, sleek lines, dark colors, nothing soft or welcoming. Everything about this space screamed power and control. "This way," Albert said, leading me down a hallway. He stopped at a door and opened it, revealing what would apparently be my room. The bedroom was larger than the entire apartment I'd shared with Raymond. A king-sized bed dominated the space, dressed in soft gray linens that looked impossibly comfortable. Subtle lighting created a warm ambiance, and an attached bathroom visible through an open door promised luxury I'd never experienced. "You'll stay here," Albert explained, leaning against the doorframe. His hands slipped into his pockets, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked almost uncertain. "I want to be clear about something. I have no expectations of physical intimacy. This arrangement is about keeping you and the baby safe. Nothing more. Do you understand?" I studied his face, trying to determine if this was genuine or some kind of manipulation, but his expression remained open, honest in a way that surprised me. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since the parking lot. Albert's gaze drifted to the window, to the city lights beyond. Several seconds passed before he answered. "The doctors told me years ago that I couldn't father children. Something about genetic incompatibility, low viability, medical jargon I didn't fully understand but accepted as fact." His jaw tightened. "I built an empire, accumulated more wealth and power than I could ever use, but I'd resigned myself to the fact that none of it would matter because there would be no one to pass it to. No legacy. No future." The raw pain in his voice made my chest ache. This fearsome alpha, this man who controlled territories and commanded loyalty through strength, sounded utterly broken. "And then you showed up," he continued, finally meeting my eyes again, "carrying something I thought was impossible. You've given me hope I didn't know I could still feel." I wanted to tell him I understood, that I wouldn't disappoint him, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I simply nodded, acknowledging the weight of what he'd shared. "Get some rest," Albert said softly. "If you need anything, there's a phone on the nightstand that connects directly to the kitchen. Margaret, my cook, will get you whatever you want." He left, closing the door quietly behind him, and I was alone in this beautiful, sterile room. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my hands over the impossibly soft sheets, and tried to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. This morning I'd been divorced and homeless. Now I was living in a penthouse with a mafia boss, who happened to be the father of my unborn child. Sleep should have come easily. I was exhausted, but my mind refused to quiet. After tossing restlessly for what felt like hours, I checked the clock. 2 in the morning. I gave up on sleep and wandered out to the balcony I'd spotted earlier. The cold night air hit my face like a slap, but it felt good, clarifying. I gripped the railing and looked out at the sleeping city, at all those lives happening below, completely unaware of my existence or my struggles. The wind whipped around me, cutting through my thin clothes, but I didn't care. "Can't sleep?" I jumped, startled by Albert's voice. He'd emerged onto the balcony behind me, and in the moonlight I could see he wore only sweatpants. His chest was bare, and what I saw there made my stomach clench. Scars crisscrossed his torso, bullet wounds, knife marks, evidence of a violent life I could barely imagine. Each scar told a story of survival, of battles fought and won. "Sorry," I mumbled. "I didn't mean to disturb you." "You didn't." He moved to stand beside me, pulling a cigarette from somewhere and lighting it. The flame briefly illuminated his face before dying. Actually, I couldn't sleep either. We stood in silence for a moment, both staring out at the view. Finally, I worked up the courage to voice my fear. "Are you scared?" I asked. "Of what?" "This me. The baby. All of it." I gestured vaguely, encompassing everything our situation entailed. Albert took a long drag from his cigarette before answering. "Terrified," he admitted. "I faced down rival gangs, negotiated with people who'd kill me without hesitation, survived more attempts on my life than I can count. But this? A child. Being responsible for another life, that scares me more than anything else ever has." His honesty disarmed me completely. I'd expected bravado, assurances that everything would be fine. Instead, he'd given me truth. "I'm scared too," I confessed. "Not of you exactly, but of your world. The violence, the danger. I don't know if I can handle it." Albert turned to face me fully. his gray eyes intense even in the darkness. My world is dangerous. I won't lie about that. But I promise you this, I will never let it touch you or our child. You'll be protected, insulated from everything ugly. That's not just a promise, Henry. It's a vow. Promises break, I said, quietly, thinking of all the vows Raymond had made and shattered. Mine don't. Albert's voice was steel. I don't make promises I can't keep. What I say I do. Always. He flicked his cigarette over the railing, watching the ember fall into darkness, then looked back at me. Learn to trust me, Henry. I know your ex-husband destroyed your faith in people, but I'm not him. Give me a chance to prove that. Something in his words, in the conviction behind them, made me want to believe. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe I was setting myself up for more heartbreak. But standing there on that balcony with the city sprawled below us and the future uncertain ahead, I made a choice. Okay, I whispered. I'll try. Albert's expression softened into something that might have been gratitude or relief. We stood together in the cold night air, two broken people trying to build something neither of us fully understood. And for the first time since discovering I was pregnant, I felt a spark of something unexpected. 2 weeks had passed since I'd moved into Albert's penthouse, and life had settled into an unexpected rhythm. Each morning I woke to the smell of breakfast wafting through the apartment. Margaret, Albert's cook, was already in the kitchen preparing food with the kind of care that reminded me of grandmothers in old movies. She was a sweet older woman with silver hair always pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "Scrambled eggs today, dear," she'd say, setting a plate in front of me, "with whole grain toast and fresh orange juice. You need your strength." Margaret had taken it upon herself to ensure I ate properly, monitoring my nutrition with gentle persistence. She never asked questions about my relationship with Albert or why I was there, simply accepting my presence and making me feel welcomed in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Albert's schedule was unpredictable. Some days he'd be gone before I woke, returning late at night when I was already asleep. Other days he'd work from home, spending hours in his office on phone calls I couldn't quite hear through the thick door. But whenever he was around, he showed a protective concern that both comforted and unnerved me. Before leaving, he'd always stop by wherever I was and ask, "Do you need anything?" When he returned, his first words were invariably, "How are you feeling today?" Small gestures, simple questions, but they carried weight I was still learning to appreciate. On a Thursday morning, I had my first prenatal checkup. Margaret helped me get ready, fussing over my coat and making sure I had everything I needed. I'd assumed Albert would send his driver, but when I stepped into the elevator, he was already waiting there, dressed in a charcoal suit that made him look every inch the powerful businessman rather than the Mafia boss I knew him to be. The clinic was in an upscale medical building downtown. The nurse who took my vitals was efficient and friendly, checking my blood pressure and asking routine questions about symptoms. Then Dr. Ellis came in, a kind-faced woman in her 50s with warm brown eyes and a reassuring manner. "Everything looks good so far, Henry," she said after the examination and ultrasound. "Your blood pressure is slightly elevated, but nothing concerning yet. The baby is developing normally." She pulled up a chair, her expression becoming more serious. "The first trimester is critical. I need you to minimize stress, get plenty of rest, and maintain proper nutrition. Can you do that?" I nodded, thinking about the chaos my life had become. Stress reduction seemed almost laughable given my circumstances. "Good. I'll see you again in 4 weeks." Dr. Ellis handed me a folder of information and prenatal vitamins. Albert was waiting in the reception area, looking oddly out of place among the pregnant women and young families. He stood immediately when he saw me, scanning my face as if trying to read the results there. "In the car?" he asked. "Everything all right?" "Yes," I reported, buckling my seatbelt. "Dr. Ellis said the baby is developing normally. She wants me to reduce stress and rest more." "Whatever you need," Albert said, pulling out of the parking lot. His hands were relaxed on the steering wheel, but I could sense the tension in his shoulders. "Is there anything specific you want? Books, supplies, different food?" I found myself smiling, a genuine expression that felt strange on my face after so long. "No, you're enough." The words had slipped out without thought, and I immediately wanted to take them back. But Albert's reaction stopped me. His expression shifted, softening in a way I'd never seen before. He looked almost vulnerable, as if the concept of being enough for someone was foreign to him. Then his phone rang, shattering the moment. I watched his face transform as he listened to whoever was on the other end. His jaw clenched and his eyes hardened to steel. What? The single word was sharp enough to cut. Understood. I'm on my way. He ended the call and glanced at me apologetically. Emergency. I need to drop you home first. The drive back was tense and silent. Albert's mind was clearly elsewhere, already planning and strategizing for whatever crisis awaited him. When we arrived at the building, he walked me to the elevator despite his obvious urgency. I don't know when I'll be back, he said. Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone except Margaret. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the vast penthouse. Margaret prepared dinner, roasted chicken with vegetables. But I barely touched it. I tried watching television in the living room, but couldn't focus on anything except the growing anxiety in my chest. Where was Albert? What kind of emergency required that tone in his voice? Was he safe? The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. 11 o'clock came and went. Then midnight. I paced the living room, my omega instinct screaming that something was wrong, that my alpha was in danger. I picked up my phone a dozen times, almost calling him before remembering his instruction not to disturb him during work. At 12:30, I heard the front door open. I rushed to the foyer and froze. Albert stood there, his white shirt stained crimson with fresh blood. Not spatters, significant amounts that suggested serious violence. What happened? I ran to him, my heart hammering with fear. My hands reached for him, trying to assess if he was injured. Albert gently but firmly moved my hands away. It's fine, he said, shrugging off his jacket. But the amount of blood told a different story. This was not fun. I grabbed his arm, more insistent this time. Tell me the truth. Are you hurt? He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there that morning. There was something haunted in his gaze, as if he'd witnessed things he wished he could forget. Some people were making moves against my organization. I dealt with it. Dealt with it how? My voice shook. My protective omega instincts were fully awake now, not for myself, but for the child I carried. What kind of world was I bringing a baby into? Albert cupped my face in both hands, forcing me to meet his eyes. Henry, you don't need to know the details. I'm here. I'm safe. That's what matters. But I did know. Violence. Bloodshed. Possibly death. This was his reality, and by staying here I was making it mine too. I stepped back, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I'd gotten myself into. I can't stay here, I heard myself say. Albert went completely still. What? Panic drove me forward. I moved toward the bedroom, thinking about my few belongings, about escape. I can't do this. The baby can't grow up in this world. Albert blocked my path, his larger frame an immovable barrier. Where would you go? The question was gentle but pointed. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I had nothing to say. No family, no friends, no money, no option. Exactly, Albert said, but there was no triumph in his voice, only concern. You're safe here, Henry, protected from my world, not part of it. I promise you that. His eyes held such earnest conviction that I felt my resolve wavering. When he pulled me into his arms, truly embraced me for the first time, I couldn't resist. His shirt was still damp with blood, but I didn't care. I buried my face against his chest and let myself be held. I won't let anything happen to you or our child, he whispered. Ever. And despite everything, I found myself believing him. The following month brought unexpected changes. Albert began spending more time at home, working from his office rather than going out to meetings. Whether this was guilt over the bloody shirt incident or genuine desire to be present, I couldn't. But slowly, carefully, we began building something that resembled companionship. He started bringing me books, novels he thought I might enjoy based on casual comments I'd made. Romance, mystery, historical fiction. I'd find them on the coffee table with small notes in his angular handwriting. Thought you might like this one. In return, I began making tea in the afternoons, learning exactly how he preferred it, strong, with just a hint of honey. Margaret had been surprised the first time she found me in the kitchen, but she quickly adapted, teaching me where everything was kept and sharing recipes. These small domestic acts felt revolutionary after years with Raymond, who'd never wanted me in his kitchen. One evening, We sat together on the balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The city below was beginning to light up, creating a beautiful contrast between day and night. I'd grown comfortable enough with Albert to ask questions I wouldn't have dared before. "Do you ever wish for a normal life?" The words came out more wistful than I'd intended. Albert considered this, rolling an unlit cigarette between his fingers. He'd stopped smoking around me after I'd mentioned the smell made me nauseous. Before? No. Power. Control. Building an empire, that was everything I wanted. He paused, gazing out at the horizon. But lately, perhaps, why the change? He reached over and took my hand, our fingers intertwining naturally. "Because of you. Because of the baby. You've shown me there might be more to existence than just surviving and conquering." Something fluttered in my chest, not the baby moving, that was still too early, but an emotional response I wasn't ready to name. This dangerous, powerful alpha was revealing depths I hadn't expected. It confused me the way my feelings were growing despite my efforts to maintain emotional distance. The peaceful moment shattered 3 days later. I was curled up on the living room sofa reading one of the novels Albert had given me when my phone rang. The number on the screen made my hands shake. "Raymond." I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "What do you want?" "Henry, please listen to me." Raymond's voice carried a desperation I'd never heard before. "I was wrong. About everything. Divorcing you, the cruel things I said, all of it was a mistake. Come back. I'll forgive you for leaving." The audacity of that statement, that he would forgive me, made me laugh. A bitter, angry sound. "Forgive me? Raymond, you're the one who filed for divorce. You threw me away like garbage. What changed? I heard you're living with some mafia boss." His voice rose to a shout. "Henry, he's using you. He's a dangerous criminal who'll hurt you when he's done." Anger surged through me, hot and cleansing. "At least he treats me with respect. At least he makes sure I'm safe and cared for. That's more than you ever did." I ended the call, my hands trembling with adrenaline. Only then did I notice Albert standing in the doorway, watching me with an unreadable expression. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded, but my mind was spinning. Was Raymond right? Was Albert using me? Were my growing feelings just another mistake in a long line of poor decisions? That night, after a mostly silent dinner, we sat in the living room. I couldn't hold the question back any longer. "Do you have feelings for me?" Albert froze, his wine glass halfway to his lips. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. "I need honesty," I pressed. "Real honesty." He set down his glass and moved to sit directly across from me, ensuring I could see his eyes. "I protect you because you matter to me. I think about your well-being constantly. I arrange my schedule around your needs without resentment." He paused, seeming to search for words. "Love? I'm learning what that means. My world doesn't allow for soft emotions, Henry. But with you, I'm beginning to understand what people mean when they talk about caring for someone beyond logic or benefit." It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't poetry or romance. But it was honest and real. And somehow that meant more. "I'm learning too," I admitted. "How to trust again. How to feel without fear." Albert leaned forward and kissed me, not with passion or demand, but with tenderness that took my breath away. His lips were soft against mine, the touch gentle and questioning rather than claiming. When we pulled apart, something fundamental had shifted between us. That night he led me to his bedroom rather than my own. But there was no pressure, no expectation of anything beyond being close. We lay together fully clothed, his arms around me, my back against his chest. His hand rested protectively over my stomach where our child grew. "Stay," he whispered into my hair. Not a command, a request. "I'm not going anywhere," I promised. We fell asleep like that, two broken people learning to trust again, learning that maybe, just maybe, we could heal each other. The vulnerability we'd both shown felt like a gift, precious and fragile. I'd spent so long protecting myself from pain that I'd forgotten how good it could feel to be truly seen by someone. Albert's breathing evened out into sleep, but I stayed awake a while longer, processing everything that had changed between us. A month ago, I'd been homeless and desperate. Now I was lying in the arms of an alpha who was learning to love, carrying his miracle child, building something neither of us quite understood yet. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, cars honking, sirens wailing, life happening in all its messy complexity. But inside this room, wrapped in Albert's warmth and protection, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. My hand covered his where it rested on my stomach, and I let myself imagine a future. Not the dangerous, violent world Albert came from, but something different. Something better. Something we might build together if we were brave enough to try. Sleep finally claimed me, and for the first time since discovering I was pregnant, I didn't have nightmares. Instead, I dreamed of a little boy with gray eyes and Albert's smile, of a life beyond these penthouse walls, of possibility. The future remained uncertain, but lying there in Albert's arms, I was willing to face it. By the 6th month of pregnancy, my body had transformed in ways both beautiful and uncomfortable. The baby bump was unmistakable now. I'd switched entirely to loose-fitting shirts and elastic waist pants. Albert attended every medical appointment with me, his presence steady and reassuring. Alice had commented on how involved he was, something she apparently didn't see often from expectant fathers. During the ultrasounds, I'd watch Albert's face more than the screen. The way his eyes would light up when he saw the baby move, the unconscious smile that would spread across his usually stern features. These moments revealed a side of him few people ever witnessed. Pure, unguarded joy. At our appointment on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Dr. Ellis performed a detailed scan, taking measurements and checking development markers. Then she turned to us with a warm smile. "Would you like to know the sex?" Albert squeezed my hand. We'd discussed this the night before, both agreeing we wanted to know. "Yes," we said in unison. "Congratulations, you're having a boy." Albert's grip on my hand tightened almost painfully. I looked at him and saw tears gathering in his eyes, though he was fighting to maintain composure. This man who faced down dangerous criminals without flinching was undone, and the news of a son. In the parking lot, away from the clinic's professional atmosphere, Albert pulled me into a fierce embrace. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "For what?" I asked, confused by the intensity of his emotion. "For giving me a family. For giving me a reason to become better than I've been." His arms tightened around me. "For showing me that life can mean something beyond power and control." My own tears started then, soaking into his expensive shirt. We stood there in the parking lot, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of our separate disasters, holding on to hope. But happiness never lasted long in Albert's world. Over the following week, I noticed him becoming increasingly tense. His phone rang constantly, calls he'd take in his office behind closed doors, emerging with a harder expression each time. Meetings ran late into the night. The lightness that had developed between us evaporated under the weight of whatever threat was building. I didn't ask. Some instinct told me the less I knew, the safer I'd be. The attack came at 3 in the morning. I jolted awake to the sound of gunfire, sharp cracks that shattered the penthouse's usual silence. Terror paralyzed me for a precious second before Albert burst through my bedroom door, fully dressed with a weapon holstered at his waist. "Come with me. Now." No room for questions in that tone. He pulled me from bed and rushed me down the hallway, away from the sounds of violence echoing from downstairs. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. More gunshots. Shouting. The unmistakable sounds of a battle happening in what I'd foolishly thought was a sanctuary. Albert opened what I'd assumed was a linen closet to reveal a reinforced steel door. Beyond it was a small room. A panic room. I realized, equipped with a phone, water, and supplies. Inside, he commanded, guiding me through. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me." I grabbed his arm, suddenly terrified. "What about you?" "I'll be fine. Trust me." He kissed me quickly, fiercely. "Protect our son." Then he was gone, and I was alone in the soundproofed room. But not completely soundproofed. I could still hear muffled gunfire, each shot making me flinch. I sat on the floor with my arms wrapped around my belly, whispering reassurances to the baby even as my own fear threatened to overwhelm me. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. The sounds eventually stopped, replaced by terrifying silence. Then a knock. "Henry, it's over. You can come out." Albert's voice. I unlocked the door with shaking hands. He stood there unharmed, no blood this time, though his face was grim. He pulled me against him and I felt his heart racing despite his haim exterior. "Everyone's gone," he said. "You're safe now." But I wasn't. None of us were safe. Not really. When morning came and the adrenaline faded, I made a decision. We need to leave the city. Albert looked up from his coffee, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. What? Leave here? Start over somewhere else? I sat beside him, taking his hand. Not for your sake or even mine. For our son. I don't want him growing up surrounded by violence. Learning that this is normal. He deserves better. Albert was quiet for a long time, staring at our intertwined fingers. You're asking me to give up everything I've built. I'm asking you to choose what matters most. I placed my other hand on my belly. Your empire or your family. Because I don't think we can have both. More silence. Then Albert pressed his forehead against mine. All right, we'll go. I'll arrange everything. Your business can be managed by people I trust. You and our son are more important than any amount of power or money. His hand covered mine on my stomach. I choose this. I choose you both. The transition took weeks of careful planning. Albert methodically transferred control of his operations to trusted lieutenants, ensuring his exit wouldn't create a power vacuum that might follow us. We found a small coastal town where nobody knew our names or our history. A place with ocean views and quiet streets, where children could play without fear. The house was simple, white walls, a picket fence, rooms filled with light instead of shadows. So different from the penthouse fortress we were leaving behind. So wonderfully, perfectly normal. Our son was born on a clear autumn morning, the ocean breeze drifting through the hospital windows. The labor was long and difficult. But when I finally held him, small and perfect with Albert's gray eyes already searching the world, every moment of pain became worthwhile. What should we name him? I asked, exhausted but euphoric. Albert cradled our son with surprising gentleness for such large, dangerous hands. Asher, he said softly. It means blessed, fortunate. A new beginning. Asher. Perfect. I watched Albert with our son and saw our future clearly for the first time. Not perfect, we'd both carry our scars forever. But ours. Real. Built on honesty and sacrifice and love that neither of us had known we were capable of. I love you, Henry, Albert said, meeting my eyes with absolute certainty. I love you too, I replied, meaning it with every fiber of my being. Our story had begun with cruelty and ended with redemption. From broken hearts and bloodshed, we'd built something beautiful, a family, a home, a future worth fighting for. And as Asher gripped his father's finger with tiny, determined hands, I knew we'd made the right choice.